This week, we're going to be covering the concept of joins. In order to understand the concept of joins, we need to use at least two tables. We're going to be working with our existing myContacts table. We're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new table, and then we're going to connect these two together. We'll be creating a new profession table, and we're going to extract information from the profession column of the myContacts table and move that information over into the profession table. I'm going to show you how to do this in this video tutorial, and then for your homework, you're going to go ahead and you're going to make a status table. You're going to take the information from the status column and you're going to put it into the status table. In order to do this, you're going to need to start up XAMPP or MAMP. You'll start your servers, and you'll probably want to go ahead and open up phpMyAdmin. You're going to want to go into your WebD 153 database, and you're going to want to export out your myContacts table. So I'm going to go to my export. I'm going to go ahead and choose SQL. I'll do custom, and I'll just select myContacts, and I'm going to go ahead and click the Go button. We've done this before, and this is simply going to create a copy of the SQL information that we're going to need. Again, this is just an insurance policy so that if we make any errors, you can start with a fresh version. In this week's lesson, I'm going to go ahead and provide the code that you're going to need to create a table. And the reason that we're going to be working with the same code is that so that everything is going to look exactly like mine. As I mentioned, we're going to be taking our existing contacts table and we're going to be pulling out some of the information and populating that information into new tables. As it stands, our existing myContacts table has the interests column. We're going to need to separate the interests out into 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is covered on page 348 of your book, and we did cover this in class last week, and it was something that you needed to do with your homework. I'm going to want you for this week to create a new SQL file. You're going to go ahead and you're going to save this file and call it chapter8.sql, and I want you to keep a running log of all of the queries for this chapter in this new SQL file. Don't forget to go ahead and insert a comment at the top with the title of this file. This is going to be chapter 8 and your name. The next step is for us to drop the existing myContact table. I'm going to go to my Structure tab, and here I have all of the tables that are in this particular database. I'm going to select my myContacts table, and I'm going to click the Drop button. Remember that this is a one-way street. Once you do this, you're not going to have the opportunity to get this information back. We'll click OK. And now we're going to go into the SQL tab and we're going to create a new myContacts table and populate it with the information that I've provided. I'm going to get the information from the chapter 8 SQL code file, and we'll get the create table and the insert statement. I'm going to copy all of this. I'm going to go back into my SQL tab and I'm going to paste this information in, and I'll click the Go button. Now if I go back into my Structure tab, you can see how I have a new myContacts table. This table has all of the information that I've provided to you. If I scroll over to the right, you're going to see that here is the interests information. And you can see that this is a non-normalized table because we have multiple values in the interests field. We're going to fix this next. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some new columns to my table. Interest 1, Interest 2, Interest 3, and Interest 4. These new columns are going to hold the interest information. I'm going to have you guys put this information in your SQL file so that I can see what you did. You'll notice that I made a comment as to what it is that I'm doing. I'm going to copy this code and I'll go back into phpMyAdmin. I'm going to go into my SQL tab, I'll clear the information and paste in that information and click Go. If we go and see the table by clicking the Browse button, you can now see that I have 4 new columns: Interest 1, Interest 2, Interest 3, and Interest 4. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the substring index to pull the information out of the original interest column and move it into interest 1, 2, 3, or 4. I'll use an update statement to do this, and I'm going to use it in conjunction with my set command, and we'll go ahead and set interest 1 to get information from the interest table and everything that's before the first comma. If I go back to the SQL tab and we paste in this code and run it, and we go ahead and browse the table, you can now see that we have the first item in interest 1. The next step is to remove this item from the original interest column. We'll use an update statement to do that. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the value of interest to be whatever is there minus whatever it was that we moved into the interest 1 column. I'm also going to eliminate the extra comma and the additional space. Remember that the substring is going to return part of the original string of the column. It takes the string and it cuts off the first part that we specify in the parentheses, and it's going to return the second part. So we're going to cut off the part that's inside the interest column, and we're going to return the length of whatever's interest 1. I'm also adding 2 more characters to the end, one for the comma and one for the space. So if we run this code, you can now see when I go back to the Browse button that the information remains in interest 1, but now has been removed from the interest column. Now we're simply going to do the same thing for the next 2 columns. So I'm using the same code where I want to update the my contacts and set interest 2 and interest 3 to their respective information. And then we want to remove that information from the interests column. So we'll go ahead and we'll run this code. I'm going to go to the SQL tab and we're just going to paste this code in. We'll click go. If we go back to browse and we check our table, you can see that now interest 2 and interest 3 have been populated. Now to go ahead and take care of interest 4. For interest 4, we're simply going to copy the information from interest 1 over to interest 4, and then we'll drop the interest column. Since I don't need to remove anything from the interest table this time, my statement is a little bit simpler. So we'll just go ahead and run that. And now if we check, you can see that column 4 has been populated. And you can see that the interest column still has some remaining information. So all we've done is just copied this information. Now all we need to do is drop this column. So I'll go back to my SQL tab and we'll just go ahead and we'll do an alter table statement, and we're simply going to drop the column interests. So now when I click go and we check our table, you can see that there is no interest column. We just have columns interest 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so now we're all done with the interest column. We're going to move on to the profession table next. It's a good idea at this point to go ahead and back up your SQL code. In chapter 10, we're going to be using our code, and so it's a good idea for you to make a copy of your code at this point. The next step for chapter 8 is that we're going to create and populate the professions table with distinct alphabetically ordered values. On page 352 and 353, you have 3 options for how you can do this. You can create the table and then insert with select. You can create the table with select and then alter to add the primary key, or you can create, select, and insert at the same time. Let's look at what some of these options look like. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create the table called profession. I will set the prof ID as a primary key. It's going to auto increment and not be null. And then I'm going to set another column called profession. And then we're going to insert into the new table in the profession column information that's coming from my contacts. So I'm going to select information from my contacts. I'm going to group by profession and I'm going to order by profession. Using group by is going to combine the duplicates into one single value for each group. Then using order by is going to give us the list alphabetically. Remember, whenever you use group by and order by, you need to do them in this order or else you get an error. Order by always needs to be last. I'm going to copy this statement and we'll go into phpMyAdmin, into the SQL tab, and we're going to create this new table. So I'll click go. And if I refresh my page, you can now see that in my WebD database, I now have a profession table. And if we look and browse it, you can see that our profession table has now been updated with information that came from the My Contacts. If we check in the My Contact table and browse the My Contact table, you're going to see that we have a profession column, and all of this information that was entered into the profession column has now been populated into the profession table, and we've sorted it alphabetically and remove any redundancies. Now, I'm going to go back into my profession column and we're going to drop this table just because I want to show you one other technique for creating and inserting the information into this table. So let's go into the WebD 153 database. I'll select my profession table and we'll drop it. And now you can see that I no longer have that profession table. I'm going to show you an alternate way to create our profession table. This time we're going to create the table using the as keyword. You can see that I'm going to create a table called profession. I'm using as, and then I'm selecting profession from my contacts. I'm grouping and ordering the profession column, and then we're going to alter the profession table and add a column called prof ID, which is going to be the primary key. The as keyword is going to funnel all of the output of the select into the new table, and this should give us the exact same results. So if I copy this code and go back into phpMyAdmin and go to my SQL tab and paste in the code and click go, you're going to now see that we end up with a new table. So I'll click the refresh button. It's going to list my new table, and if we click on the new table and browse, once again, it's populated with all of the information, and the information is all sorted alphabetically. I've just showed you methods 1 and 2 from the book. If you want to try method 3, you're just going to need to drop the profession table and then create and run the code to end up with a profession table. Ultimately, we just want to end up with a profession table that has the profession column and the information is ordered alphabetically. So now we have two separate tables, but they're not connected. To connect them, we're going to use a foreign key. So I'm going to need to add the foreign key into the My Contacts table. I'm going to add the prof ID as a foreign key, and we're going to add some constraints on it within the My Contacts table. On page 307 of your book, it shows you how to alter the table and add the foreign key constraints. We're going to go through that now. So now we have the two separate tables, but they are not connected. To connect them, we will use the foreign key. We need to add into the My Contacts table the profession ID as a foreign key, and we're going to add a constraint on the My Contacts table as well. Page 307 of your book shows you how to alter the table and add the foreign key constraint. The code that we're going to be using looks like this. Here we're using an alter table statement and we're altering My Contacts. We're going to add the prof ID as an integer, not null, and we're going to add it after the birthday. So we're just going to add the column into My Contacts. Then we're going to add the add index and identify it as prof ID. The index is the foreign key, and here we are assigning it to the prof ID. Then we're going to go ahead and use an update statement to update both My Contacts and the profession tables. We're going to set mycontacts.profid. This is known as dot notation. And here we're setting mycontacts.profid equal to profession.profid. Dot notation is a way that you can specify the table name and the column name. So here we're just specifying the table of my contacts and the column of prof ID equal to the table of profession and the column of prof ID. Then we're going to use a where statement, and we're going to say my contacts.profession is going to be equal to profession.profession. So we're just creating a relationship between those two columns. Let's go ahead and run this code inside of SQL. I'm going to go to my SQL tab. I'm going to paste in this code, and we'll go ahead and click go. If we go into browse, and right now I'm on the profession table, you can see that nothing really looks different. If I go into the my contacts table and click browse, all you see is that after the birthday column, we now have our prof ID column. So looking inside of SQL, it's pretty difficult to see that the foreign key has been added. But if we go to our structure tab, and if we come down here to the bottom and click indexes, you're going to see that the prof ID is listed underneath the primary key. So this means that we do have an index. The unique column for prof ID says no, which means it's not a unique index. So what that means is we can store the same value multiple times in that column. Foreign keys are normally used in a one-to-many relationship, so that the foreign key column in a child table should normally be able to store multiple references to the single value in the parent table. So if we switch back to the Browse button of the My Contacts table, and if you notice that product ID has a numeric value that's assigned to each profession, this numeric equivalent for each profession is a result of this second statement that we did, where we updated my contacts and profession and set the my contacts prof ID equal to the profession prof ID, where my contacts.profession were equal to profession. So that enabled each profession to have its own numeric equivalent. Eventually, we're going to get rid of the profession column and only reference from the profession table. But first, we need to set up a foreign key constraint. Currently, I don't have any data integrity. So if I was to insert a new record that had a new profession that was not in my profession table, so let's say I added a new profession to my contacts and I listed a profession that wasn't listed, so maybe cattle rustler or something like that. That particular profession would not necessarily be added to my contacts table, and that's because I don't have any sort of data integrity. So if I was to set up a new record inside of my contacts that listed a profession that wasn't currently part of our profession table, that profession wouldn't necessarily be added to my profession table, and that's because I don't have any sort of data integrity. We want to add data integrity, and we can do that by adding a foreign key constraint. So I'm going to add the following bit of code. I'm going to alter the My Contacts table. I'm going to add a constraint to the profession prof ID foreign key. I'm setting this up as a foreign key. So I'm setting up a new name for this. And usually I add a underscore FK to the item that I want to be a foreign key, so it's very obvious with the name. And we're assigning this to be a foreign key, and we're turning the prof ID into the foreign key. We're referencing the profession table, and we're referencing prof ID. I've also added some on delete restrict and on update restrict. When you add a foreign key constraint, you have three options for what happens when you update or delete a record in the parent table that has a dependent record in the child table. Restrict is going to reject the update or delete the operation. Cascade is another option. It's going to update or delete the row in the parent table and automatically update or delete the matching row in the child table. And then we have another option that would be set null. That's going to update or delete the row in the parent table and set the foreign key in matching rows of the child table to null automatically. We're going to use the restrict constraint here. So using a foreign key is going to establish a parent-child relationship between the two tables. The parent table is the table that contains the primary key that's used as a foreign key in the child table. Let's copy this bit of code and put it into our SQL statement. I'm working on the My Contacts table here. I want to alter my contacts. I'm going to click Go. And if we go back to Browse, you can see that now these items are linked, and it still doesn't give me too much information, but they are linked. I could click them and it would actually take me and show me that 22 was assigned or associated with the technical writer. So it actually took me to the profession table and showed me technical writer. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go into the My Contact table and we're going to delete the profession column. We no longer need this anymore. So the easiest way for me to do this is to go to Table My Contacts, go to Structure, and I can just select Profession and just choose to drop this. It's going to ask me, do you really want to drop this? I'll click OK. Conversely, we could have written our own alter statement to drop this column. But when I click OK, that column is now dropped, and if we go back to Browse, we no longer have that column, but we do have the associated professional ID, which of course is going to link us to our profession table, which is going to give us the information that that ID is associated with. So a few important things to remember are when you're defining a foreign key constraint, it must be defined in the child table. In our case, our child table is the My Contacts table. It's the table that stores the other table's primary or unique key as a foreign key. The other thing that you should be aware of, but you shouldn't really have to do anything about because it's automatically going to be set, is if you click on your database, you should be using a database type of INNODB. This is the storage engine, and it's the default storage engine when you create a table in mySQL. And finally, the column that is used to store the foreign key needs to be indexed. So hopefully now you know how you can set up a foreign key and how you can set a relationship between two tables and actually bring in various information from one table into another. This is a very important step in us being able to normalize our tables as we create them.